All right, here we go. MLS valuations. Sportico dropped their MLS valuations just last week. I think it was the end of last week. I have all 30 teams and their numbers here that I'm going to share on the screen. We'll start with, actually, I'll make myself a little bit smaller because I don't think that that's the best way to see. Well, we'll leave it here. Los Angeles FC, LAFC, number one on the list, $1.28 billion, according to Sportico. And you can see the value change there. Which, again, LAFC being number one is maybe not a shock exactly, but it is interesting that Inter Miami hasn't passed LAFC because of the Messi effect. The Galaxy at number three. Atlanta United actually dropping a little bit down to number four. NYCFC, a team that does not even have their stadium yet, is number five. Now imagine that stadium, although they didn't move from last year. NYCFC has been number five on the list for at least the last 2 years. Austin, Seattle, Columbus jumping up, Cincinnati jumping up, Toronto falling, Portland, DC United, Charlotte. Actually, mildly surprised DC United has that kind of valuation, although it's a 0% change from last year. Charlotte, Philadelphia, St. Louis City, and then the second half of the league, Minnesota United, Sporting Kansas City, 17th on the list. Sporting Kansas City. As I mentioned earlier that with the deal to buy Dejan Joveljic and sort of the money that they spent, what is their spending power? The fact that Sporting Kansas City is worth more, according to Sporting, okay, the other part of this thing that's worth mentioning is I don't think they're arbitrary numbers. I think they're informed numbers on some level, meaning that Sportico is using information at their disposal to make these valuations. But whether or not anybody would pay this money for any of these teams is an open question. Don't just say no. Just don't say no, that no one would ever pay that much. It's possible no one would. But we actually aren't sure. And so much at what's at work here when it comes to sports teams, right? Any sport. I actually was over on Blue Sky, I think, the other day, and I don't have the visual here for you, but perhaps I can bring up the Blue Sky post to tell you what I'm talking about. Tariq Panja, who writes for the New York Times, The Athletic, the New York Times, I guess is where his bylines appear. He referenced, I believe this is a cricket team. I think this is a cricket team. The London Spirit. London Spirit 100? I don't know what that is. What is 100? Somebody help me out. That's the one thing I don't know. London Spirit 100, valued at £295 million. And Tariq writes, the price tag for the London Spirit 100 team is mind-boggling. The prospective new owners, American tech tycoons, will pay £145 million for 49%, giving the team a valuation of almost £300 million. It doesn't own any infrastructure. It is just a couple years old and generates less than £2 million in revenue. How disconnected, right? You're looking at these numbers and you say, wow, these numbers are so disconnected from reality in terms of what Major League Soccer clubs actually bring in. How can you say that any of these teams are worth this much? It's got to be a bubble. But this is a bubble everywhere right now. If it isn't a bubble, 100 is cricket. Thank you. I figured it was. I guessed. I got it right. Thank you, Ethan, that this was cricket. So this cricket team in London goes for almost, or is valued almost at £300 million, which is what, $350 million? Right? And it's only a couple years old, and it doesn't bring in any revenue relative to its price tag or its valuation. Tariq writes, sport, specifically selling teams to people with more money than they know what to do with, creates this type of silliness. Add a touch of ego created by battling other people with more money than they want to do with, a sense of scarcity, FOMO, and this is where you land. This is it. Right? Major League Soccer may not be, and I see this all the time, right? How many times have you seen someone say, why would you buy an MLS team when you can spend a fraction of that money? Or why would you pay for a franchise in Major League Soccer via expansion, whatever? Why would you do that? Why would you do that instead of going to England where you can buy a team for a fraction of the cost? Not just a team in the National League, for example, trying to do a Robin Ryan. I don't mean that, but even teams in League One or the championship, they don't cost nearly as much. Now, again, this is a good point. The threat of relegation brings the price down. Right? The threat of relegation means that you have to worry about your revenue dropping significantly if you get relegated, and therefore that means there's a discount. Right? But the other side of that coin is spend a fraction of the money you would pay for an MLS team, and then you can be promoted, and then you can one day be a Premier League team, and you can pull off the Robin Ryan story, which seems to be coming together. I mean, I don't know that they're going to make the Premier League, but they keep climbing the ladder, and people are pointing to that and say, "Oh, well, why don't you just do that instead?" But some of this is not about, some of this is not. It depends on the buyer, right? There are different kind of buyers, different kinds of interests. The idea that people want to be involved in sports, there are only so many of those opportunities around, right? How many American billionaires? I don't even know if they're all billionaires. How many American tycoons coveted the idea of owning an NFL team just because there's only 30 of them or 32 of them? And if you are in that club, you're a special level of wealthy, of rich. You're a special level in that. Again, if you want to talk about semantics, all right, I'll bring Jason back in here on the chat. You cannot buy an MLS team. All you can do is become an investor in the league itself. The league allows you to run a franchise, a team in a particular location. That is, if you want to be pedantic about it, that is true. Right? That is true. That you are not buying the club itself because the club itself is not an individual business. I don't know how much that matters now. Like, it's worth pointing out, but I don't know how much it matters at this point. I guess it means that there's always a chance that MLS could pull the plug on your local franchise rights. Right? I suppose that's part of it. The league has operated sort of in a way that makes it feel like it's the same as all these other sports, in that you buy a team, right? Deloy Hansen sells Real Salt Lake. The group in Vancouver is selling the Vancouver Whitecaps. They're selling the rights to operate the club in Vancouver, and you would replace them as investors in Major League Soccer. Right? But when the club, the rights go up for sale, you are paying the valuation based on that location and those revenues. Again, you don't have to put a ton of stock in this if you don't feel like it. I get it if you don't want to. And certainly, again, the idea is, does this mean anything, or is it just kind of window dressing that's meant to make us feel better about the league? Or even if it's not, if that's not possible because of where MLS is in world football, or because you don't like the structure, because there's no pro rel, or because the league feels like it is trying to squash competition. I think it's all part of the story. Right? I don't love this idea that we're tethering fan satisfaction to things like this. Right? Or even, if you want to talk about it, it's a little dirty to be like, oh, the league spent $25 million on a player. Look at how far we've come. That's such a big deal. It's such a great thing. That's only relative to the rest of the world, right? Right? Should it matter how much money the league is spending? Does equality, unless you think it's a one-for-one correlation, dollars spent to the entertainment value, maybe not even the quality of the play. If you care about the quality of the play, then you will care about that part of it. But if you care about the competitive level of the league, or you care about the rivalries at play, or whatever it is, right? Major League Soccer will always look poor in comparison to something like the Premier League, if you are judging MLS by the standards of the Premier League. Should we? And that's with this too, right? Should we look at these valuations and say, well, that's not real because you're not actually buying the club, or because there's no promotion or relegation? I popped up the data viz from Sportico on this, which I think is interesting. You might not be able to see, you may not be able to see entirely what's going on here, but I hope you get a sense of it. Obviously, the bigger the circle, the higher the valuation. LAFC has the highest valuation in Major League Soccer, according to Sportico, at $1.28 billion. You can also see some of their corporate partners and who's giving them money. Sure, you can see that. You can also, again, see revenue, right? 2024 revenue for LAFC was $142 million. Again, if I care about that as a measure of where MLS is, if I care about that, if I think about that as some sort of validation of the model, or just that I want my league, right? If I strip away my concerns about structure or about single entity or about, anything like what Jason is talking about, individual team success is secondary to the success of Major League Soccer. That, again, worth pointing out that the driver for MLS isn't whether or not any of their teams win a CONCACAF Champions Cup or succeed at this or that. It is the business of MLS as a whole, which will naturally depress the ability of these clubs to compete at those levels because they are playing a different game than the clubs in Mexico. If we're talking about the CONCACAF Champions Cup, which just got underway, or if we're talking about the Club World Cup, which is coming. MLS is playing playing a different game because the league dictates that in order to do things like this, grow the valuations of its franchises, they're going to restrict spending. Right? If you have $142 million of revenue and you're not spending anywhere near that, you're spending a fraction of that on your player salaries, well, obviously that's going to improve your value as a business proposition. The point is to play soccer and win championships, and this feels... By the way, this obviously has infected not just Major League Soccer. This is everywhere, right? This is what football has become. The business of football has trumped anything to do with whether it's good for the game or the access to the game. I always think about, when these topics always come up, I always think about the FC United of Manchester people who split away from Manchester United as fans, whatever that was. How long ago was FC United of Manchester founded? Right? And they did that because they didn't like the influence of Sky Sports on their club, on their league, on the things they cared about, the football. It wasn't pure to them anymore. So they went off and started their own club, started from the bottom of the pyramid in England, named it FC United of Manchester, and they go out and they sing songs and they watch their team and they feel content. They're not going out to Old Trafford anymore. And that's okay with them. 2005. If you don't know the story of FC United of Manchester, go look it up. They didn't like Glazer taking over. That's part of what it was. They didn't like their club being bought by the Americans. And if you are not able to make peace with a lot of the things that have happened in terms of the business of football, then that's really your only option, is to go pull away. Because I don't know where we go from here in terms of how much business has taken over, how much the interest in making money has taken over. It is things like La Liga setting match times for the Asian market, or talking about playing meaningful league matches outside of their home country. It's things like, obviously, the Super League and how that has impacted world football, even if it doesn't exist now, or we're not sure it can exist in the way it was proposed. And what was the Unify League? That's gone quiet, right? I just, again, so much of what this is people who want to make money, seeing an audience who is so emotionally connected to the possible product here, or to their teams, to their clubs, to the game, that they are more easily exploited than almost any other consumer. I mean, sports creates these bonds, and then the people in charge, or the people who take over, the people who buy the clubs, look at that as an opportunity to manipulate us. All right, this has gotten real preachy. I didn't mean for it to happen. Just want to talk about how much LAFC was worth. That's the solo edition of Soccer Morning on a Wednesday. Again, hope Rob gets better, and we're back together on Friday. A little hint, or a little teaser, rather. Have booked David Gass from Soccer Wise for Friday to talk some Major League Soccer and the season coming up. We'll talk about the cash market, the moves, the clubs that are putting together their rosters right now, and who he sees as potential contenders. I'll remind you again, please like and subscribe. Definitely subscribe to Morning Kick Around, on YouTube. Help us get to 1,000. You can throw a little bit of money our way if you want to help the show and support us on Ko-Fi at ko-fi.com/morningkickaround. You can follow us on socials, mkickaround on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Also, I'm Davis Jason on Blue Sky. If you want to follow me, you can reach out at on email, through email. That's how you say that. morningkickaround@gmail.com. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much for listening, guys. Enjoy your soccer, and I'll see you on Friday.